All right, it's good to see everybody. Welcome back. Monday, Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. We're making a lot of progress, which is fantastic. I always wanted to go through the entire Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. Let me just say, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, right? Kitzur just means Kitzur literally means short, but it's a abbreviated version of the entire Shulchan Aruch, written by Mr. Gansfried, Rabbi Gansfried in Hungary. It's called machmir. It's machmir. It's stringent. So there are certain stringencies that we'll come across. I think I mentioned this in the past, that we might not necessarily do in practicality. Certainly there is room for not being so stringent, machmir. So if you see people doing something that's not according to Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, make sure you ask the rabbi before you approach that person. In my humble opinion, learning from my own mistakes and seeing it from other people. Okay, so we're moving along. We talked yesterday or last week about when you take the Torah out, what do you do? How do you walk? Right? We make a big circle. You can't talk while the Torah is being read and such. Now we're going to move on to how do we call people up to the Torah? I'm the Gabbai. I'm the one who calls people up to the Torah, so I should hopefully know these laws. Let's go right in. And today fits in very well. It was an interesting case, which I will present. What if there's no Kohen? Okay, I'll say it outside. Who gets precedence always? A Kohen. A Kohen always gets precedence. When we're doing the benching, we're blessing after we have a meal on Shabbos, or really anytime you have bread. And you have to do that long Birkat HaMazon, or we call in Yiddish benching. Benching literally means to bless, the blessing. But you're benching, you can make a mizuman, which is a certain thing that we say in the beginning. I think we went over that in Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. That little to get people ready. Mizuman means like to get prepared. Like, let's prepare everybody. We're about to bench. We're about to do the Birkat HaMazon collectively. So we say certain things in Chabad, we say it in Yiddish, Rabbi Sai, Mervel and Benchin, Rabbi Sai, people, everybody, congregation, let's bench. And they say, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarach Mi'ata V'Delam. In Ashkenazi circles, they say, Robotai Nivarech, which means the same thing. Let's bless. Robotai, congregation, let's bless. You can even say it in English. Everybody, let's start. Now, the one who leads the Birkat HaMazon, who leads the benching, is usually it's an honor. So it's given first to the Kohen. The Kohen always gets first dibs. And then usually a Levi gets second dibs. But that's not always the case. And it almost never happens, to be honest. The Levite, whatever. Unless the Kohen's there, we don't really care. So today, what if even with regards to getting an aliyah to the Torah, you give precedence to the Kohen. What if there's no Kohanim in the congregation? Do you have to give it to the Levi next? Or not? And in today's case, what if there was a Kohen in the middle of the service, in the Shmona Esrei? He was in the Amidah prayer when it was time for me to call people up to the Torah. So he was the only Kohen available in the room, but he was in the middle of the Amidah, and he can't move, he can't listen, he can't do anything. Do I wait for him, or do we move on with the show? So let's go into this. Maybe it'll say in the first halacha, then otherwise I'll tell you the answer. If there's a Kohen present in the synagogue, he must be called to the Torah, to the reading first, even if he is an unlearned person. Provided he is an upright person, he has preference over a Torah scholar. Even if the Kohen wants to forgo his right of getting that first aliyah, he can't do it. After the Kohen, a Levi is called. And if there's no Levi, the Kohen who was called first is called again in his stead. And the Gabbai announces, instead of a Levi, or I say Bimkom Levi, or Bimkom Levi. That happens to us every Shabbos. We have 2 minions on Shabbos, 2, and there we have 5 Levis in our congregation, and they all pray in 1 minyan. not the minyan that I'm a part of. So very often the Kohen will get two aliyahs. And the Gabbai announces, instead of a Levi, Bimkam Levi, if a Kohen is not present in the synagogue, a Levi or Yisrael is called in his stead. And in such a case, we should call the most learned in Torah among those present. So first dibs goes then to the biggest Torah scholar. And the Gabbai announces, if there is no Kohen present, a Levi instead of a Kohen. So I'll say it how we normally say it. I'll tell you in a minute, in a few seconds. Or a Yisrael instead of a Kohen. So we'll say, Yisrael bimkam Kohen. So I'll say, Yamod, Yasol ben Moshe, Yisrael bimkam Kohen. The Yisrael instead, in the place of a Kohen. Or Levi bimkam Kohen. When the Yisrael is called in place of a Kohen, a Levi is not called afterwards. So you could give a Levite the first aliyah. But if you don't give him that, you decide to give it to Yisrael, which is something that I do probably 90% of the time, you cannot call a Levite for the second aliyah. Once you forget, the Levi only gets one chance. And if I don't give it to him, he doesn't get it back. Believe me, they get plenty of aliyahs, especially on Shabbos. There's not too many Levites. A community made up of only Kohanim or Leviim should put the question to a learned sage as to how to conduct themselves. So today's question, it was Rabbi Schneer. Okay, this is what happens. Let me tell you exactly what happens in our minyan very often. There are usually three Kohanim. Rabbi Silverberg Sr., Rabbi Silverberg's son-in-law, Rabbi Shloimi, and Rabbi Schneer. Yeah. Now, there are only three, and we read the Torah 4 times a week. They get a lot of aliyahs. You can imagine. On every Shabbos, they basically get an aliyah, maybe twice on Shabbos, and they could get it Monday and Thursday. However, there are we have 25 people davening in a regular weekday minyan that won't necessarily get an aliyah on Shabbos. So what the rabbi does is, he says, there will be a Kohen's meeting outside. So when the Torah is taken out, before I call anybody up, all the Kohanim leave. And so it provides an opportunity for other people to get an aliyah. Today, I think it was the first time it ever happened in the 7 years I've been the Gabbai over here. When I went to go, I scanned the room after the rabbis leave to see, who am I going to give it to? And I see Rabbi Schneer still davening in the corner. And I was like, I don't know what to do. Now, I know, we spoke about it before, when the person's in the middle of the Amidah, you can't call them up. You can say whatever you want, but they can't move. They can't do anything. In fact, if you're in the middle of the Amidah and they start reading the Torah, you're supposed to stop and listen to the Torah reading, but you actually have not fulfilled your obligation of hearing the Torah when you're supposed to. It's an issue. There's a mitzvah to hear the Torah on Mondays, Thursdays, and twice on Shabbos. And if you don't hear it, okay, whatever, you missed out. So I would advise, I'm not saying you should daven fast or pray slow or whatever it is, but make sure you're in a position not like that situation. So I wasn't sure. I was like, I actually think he just discharges his obligation. Like it's as if he's not even here. And I walked out to the Cohen's meeting, all 2 of them, and I said, what do I do? Schneer is in the middle of the Amidah. The rabbi said, it doesn't matter. It's as if he's not there. So interesting. I had never had that before. So that's it. So I don't even think I called up a Levi. I just called up a Yisrael. And there was a guy visiting from Israel, so I gave it to him. He actually was visiting from Efrat. Efrat is a community that was created by Rabbi Riskin in America. He had like a congregation, like a synagogue of 200 families, and they all made Aliyah together. It's quite interesting. He's an amazing person. I don't know if he's still alive, actually, but I think he is. I don't know if he is. Amazing guy, though. Incredible. Okay, moving on. If the Kohen is in the middle, is the mid Kriya Shema. Oh, if I would have just kept going in Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, I would have seen the answer. Or in the middle of Birchas, of the Kriya Shema. In other words, he's in a place that he can't do Shemona Esrei, even if there's no other Kohen present. He should not be called to the Torah. There's no need to wait for him. for this would be an imposition on the congregation. Okay, I am very careful, machmir. I'm very stringent to make sure the minyan moves. Not moves fast, but I don't like any hiccups in the minyan. I like it just keep going. I know everyone's name. I get very antsy in my pantsy if there's any sort of hiccup. So I love seeing things like this. You just move on. Yeah, you don't just forget him. Rather, a Levi or Yisrael is called. The Gabbai then does not say there's no Kohen present, but instead says Levi Yisrael instead of a Kohen. Just like I said, yeah, Yisrael bimkam Kohen. I called up David Herschel ben Yitzchak bimkam Kohen. Yisrael bimkam Kohen. If it happened that the Kohen was called, if he was in the middle of Kriya Shema or the brachas, he may go up and recite the brachas. So basically, I'll tell you something that comes up very often. A guy might be in the middle of the blessings of the Shema. You're not allowed to talk in the blessings of the Shema. Well, but you can't have like idle conversation. But here in Shulchan Aruch, it says if you call him up, he can say the brachas. Where it becomes kind of tricky is if you don't know the person's name. And sometimes they're like, in the beginning of the siddur, there's an aleph base, and there's always like spelling out the letters for you so you can figure out his name. So if Rabbi Schneer was in the middle of Kriya Shema, I could call him up. But he shouldn't read along with the reader. However, if at all possible, he should finish the subject in which he's in the middle and stop at a place where the subject ends. In other words, you should be in between paragraphs. You should try to get to like a break and then come up to read the Torah. If he's in the middle of Shemona Esrei, even if he's called, he can't go up. Similarly, between Gaal Yisrael and Shemona Esrei, so there's a blessing that we say right before the Shemona Esrei, the Amida begins. Baruch atah Hashem Gaal Yisrael. In between that period of time, he didn't take his 3 steps back or 3 steps forward. It's as if he's already started his Amida, and he should continue. By the way, just a little factoid. You should try to say that blessing, Baruch atah Hashem, Go'al Yisrael, together with the congregation. There is a rabbi named Uri Kaplun, who's a big editor in all the Chabad Hasidus books. He lives in Jerusalem. You walk into his house, his apartment. The first time I ever walked in there, he had a big boomerang on the wall. I thought, wow, this is going to be a cool guy. And comes this like guy walking up pretty slow, very long beard, looks very holy. I'm like, wow, it's this big boomerang, a boomerang. And he opens his mouth and he says, I can't really do it. And he's like, hello, welcome to my home. He's from Australia. He's from Shepparton. He's from Melbourne, Australia. Anyway, he's a big editor. And he would always remind me, I don't know why. I don't even think he knew my name, but I would go to his house pretty often. I promise you, I don't think he knew my name. And he was like, make sure when you get to Gal Yisrael, you should maybe speed up. If you don't think you're going to say those words together with the congregation, maybe speed up so that you can say it together with the congregation. I don't know why you drilled that in my head. Perhaps it was only for me to tell to someone here. And you have a lot of power in your hand. With that information, I don't know what you can accomplish. Similarly, between Gal Yisrael and Shemona Esrei, you can't go up. However, if he's in Elokai Netzor, in certain places you could do it. Look in the back of the siddur. It's up to the Gabbai. The Gabbai should really, what I do is I walk around and I look inside your siddur to see where you're holding. And then I decide whether to give you an aliyah or not. Whatever. We do everything we can to avoid a Kohen. If a person's in a compromising situation, we don't call them up. Okay. If a Kohen or a Levi was called and it's discovered that he's not present, that happens. Yeah, a guy 5 seconds ago he was in. It happens to me all the time. A guy was in, and then I'm like, okay, I'm going to give him an aliyah. And then not 5 seconds later, I call the person up and I look around and he's not there. He walked out at the exact moment that I did it. Another should not be called by name. So somebody else will come up, but we don't call that person by their name. So that should not be said that the first one's lineage is defective. It's as if we found out, oh my gosh, he's not actually a Kohen or a Levi, or maybe he's not Jewish. We just don't say the person's name. It's as if, hopefully people won't realize what's going on, even though of course they will. Instead, and nobody would ever think that anyway. Instead, to the second one, say, hey, you go up. I usually go like this. and he should go up. However, if in his absence they call his son, he may be called by the name, for this would not be misconstrued, right? If I wouldn't think, it's not, there's no blemish on the lineage if I'm calling his son. For his father's lineage was defective, the sons would also be defective. Similarly, if the Kohen or the Levi cannot go up to the Sifrei Torah because he's in the middle of the Shemona Esrei, another may be called by name, for all can see that the former Kohen does not go up because he's not permitted to do so. In other words, the guy's in the middle of Shemona Esrei, in the Amidah, you can call somebody else up by their name because everyone will realize, oh, he can't go up because he's in a position that he can't go up. The Gabbai wasn't paying attention. People love to call out the Gabbai. If a Yisrael is called up and is not present, another may be called by the name because where a Yisrael is involved. Okay, we don't do that. If he has defective lineage, it doesn't matter. Okay, nevertheless, we just call somebody up. I really don't ever give myself an aliyah except for my birthday, and Chabad has certain times of the year that we make sure to get an aliyah before Yod Shvat, before Gimel Tammuz. And one of the other times I get an aliyah is whenever something like this happens. Somebody is not in a position, then I just walk up and I do it, which I may say hardly ever happens. Similarly, if a Kohen or a Levi were called up for Acharon or Maftir on Shabbos or Yom Tiv, they are not present, and another may be called by name. Okay, so a Levi, there's 7 aliyahs. The first one goes to the Kohen, second one goes to the Levi. Unless there is no Levi, then the Kohen will take the second aliyah as well. And then the rest are given to a Yisrael. Now, obviously, if there's a whole minion of Levites or Kohanim, figure out what to do. Maftir, there's an 8th aliyah. It's called Maftir, and that can be given to anybody. Usually I give it to the most scholarly or the one who can read it the fastest if it's a very long Haftorah. Usually Rabbi Silberberg gets it, unless there's so we have a custom that the one who gets Maftir also reads the Haftorah. For my bar mitzvah, I read the Maftir, I read it from the Torah, and then I did the Haftorah. You actually can have more than just 8 aliyahs. And in fact, sometimes we even do that here. So the rule here is in our shul, if you sponsor Kiddush, then you get an aliyah, or you can, if you're a woman, you can give the aliyah to somebody else. Now, what happens if there's like 9 people that sponsor Kiddush? So what typically happens is we will add another aliyah. There'll be a total of 9 aliyahs. We'll stop at a different place. The minimum amount you need to read for an aliyah, the minimal amount of passages you need to read is 3. So we'll break a little early, and you won't see that very often, but it does happen. Anybody have any questions so far? Okay, here we go. So if there's no synagogue, if there's no Kohen in the synagogue, or if there was, he was unknown to anyone, and the Yisrael is called in his stead. The Yisrael came up, and he already started saying, Baruch Hu es Hashem hamavorach. Yeah, it happens. The guy, there's like groups of people. When a new face comes in our shul, I never have to walk up to the guy and ask him, are you a Yisrael or a Levi? It's very important for me to know. So I don't, but there are like 6 people that have taken upon themselves to figure out if this guy is a Yisrael or a Levi before I know. But sometimes it can happen. Well, we forgot to ask. There's a new face, we forgot to ask. We find out afterwards that he really was a Yisrael. So he really was a Kohen, and Yisrael was called up before. What happens? So if the guy already started, if it was me, I walked up before. If I started saying Baruch Hu es Hashem hamavorach, no, all I said was Baruch Hu es Hashem hamavorach, but he had not begun the bracha asher bachar banu. Right? There's 2 parts to the getting an aliyah. You say Baruch Hu es Hashem hamavorach, and then the congregation says Baruch Hu es Hashem hamavorach le'olam vad, and then I say back Baruch Hu es Hashem hamavorach le'olam vad, and then here comes another blessing that I say. Baruch atah Hashem l'kei melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ami v'no san lanas teirasei Baruch atah Hashem noisin ha'teira. That's called the second part. So what if I didn't say that, and and the Gabbai taps me on the shoulder and says, oh, wait, Jimmy the Kohen just walked. Yeah, he was in here. Yeah, what happened? So if I didn't say that second part, the second part, the real bracha part, and then the Kohen arrived, or it was realized that he was present, the Kohen is called and he goes up, and he too begins Baruch Hu es Hashem Hamavarach. So I get kicked out. In order to avoid embarrassment, don't worry, it doesn't embarrass me. The Yisrael should not stand there until after the Kohen and the Levi are called, and then he is called. Okay, so no, he should stand there. Yeah, the Yisrael should stand there until after the Kohen and Levi are called, and then I get my Aliyah back. However, if the Yisrael had already said the second part, then we just, the show goes on, and I just continue, and everyone will yell at me for the rest of the period of time. The same applies if a Levi is called instead of a Kohen, and the Kohen arrived before the Levi. Yeah, okay, Seder. The same applies if no Levi is present, or okay. Basically, there's a point of no return. If you say a blessing and you already said Hashem's name, you already said God's name, you don't go back. You keep moving on. Okay, this next halacha is very common. Two brothers should not be called consecutively, one after the other, whether they are brothers from the same father or from the same mother. Similarly, a father and a son, or a grandfather and his grandson should not be called one after another for fear of Maris Ayin. Everybody knows what Maris Ayin is. Maris Ayin is you don't want to brag. Yeah, you start bragging in some sort of way, or you start highlighting. Yeah, you'll see very often people will not post pictures of their children on social media. They will not if you get an award, the person doesn't post it themselves. You don't talk about how many children you have. You don't talk about anything where people might get jealous and then start judging you, unfavorably, like we love to do with celebrities. Usually it has an effect. We believe, so to speak, in the butterfly effect. It's not called the butterfly effect, but even your thoughts and especially your speech has an effect upon the world, and you don't want to bring that negative energy to yourself. So that's called Maris Ayin. No, Ayin Hara. Sorry, Ayin Hara. It's called the evil eye. This applies even if the first is called for Acharon and the second for Maftir. Right? Maftir is not really considered part of the 7 aliyot. Nevertheless, we don't call the father for the seventh aliyah, and then Maftir is given to the son. We don't do that. But only on a Shabbos. Okay, and the second for Maftir, but only on a Shabbos when another Sifrei Torah is not taken out for the Maftir. However, when another Sifrei Torah is taken out for Maftir, for example, this Shabbos, we're going to take out 2 Sifrei Torah. Why? We're going to take out the Sifrei Torah for Parshas Vayakel. Please come tonight to the class. We'll talk a little bit about that Parsha. And then it is also Parshas Shkalim. We read about the Machzis HaShekel, the half shekel that the Jewish people gave. We always read it right before Rosh Chodesh Adar, which next week is Rosh Chodesh Adar Beis, the real Rosh Chodesh. Purim's coming up. So this Shabbos is called Shabbos Mevarchim, the Shabbos that we bless the next month. And in this Parsha, we're going to take out 2 Sifrei Torah because we're going to have one about the Parsha and another one about the half shekel. Okay, so if I messed up and I called up Jimmy for number 7, and then I call up his son, Timmy, for the Maftir, it's okay. I might be all right. Because Timmy is going to be reading from another Torah. However, when another Sifrei Torah is taken out for the Maftir, it is permitted to call consecutively 2 brothers or a father and a son. Similarly, when the one called to Maftir is not yet bar mitzvah, Chabad does not do this. It is permitted. Okay, I'll tell you guys that in a second. In all above, the guy's not bar mitzvah. How can you get an aliyah? So, okay, I'll come back to that in a second. If they've already called him and he goes up to the Torah, he should not descend from the bima. If 2 brothers who only have the same mother but have different fathers, or a father and his grandson were already called, though they have not yet come up, they may ascend to the bima when it is necessary, permitted even initially for them to be called consecutively. Okay. When it's necessary, it can be. Okay, so this actually answers one of our questions. What if the whole family? Yeah, Rabbi Silberberg all of his kids are Kohanim. Even one of his son-in-laws is a Kohen. So if they go away every year, for like a week. They have like a family getaway, and they bring a Torah. They go for Shabbos. 7 out of the 8 aliyahs are going to be given to Kohanim. So how do they figure it out? So when necessary, in a situation like that, where brothers are going to be called up one after another, father and son. Yeah. So if you got to do it, you got to do it. I just want to mention over here, it's something about one who is not a bar mitzvah. There is a concept that a 12-year-old can hold a chumash in his hand, and it's like an elevated status. He gets like elevated, so to speak, spiritually. So if you're in a situation where you have 9 men, there's no 10th man coming, but you have a child who's 12 years old, there is places, and I've actually been one of those kids at one point in time. It was a big uproar in the synagogue. When they found out it happened, I had no idea. I held a chumash in my hand, and it was a regular minyan. They had a minyan. They counted me as part of the minyan. It is not a widely done custom. It's it works spiritually, but Chabad certainly does not try to do that, even though it was in a Chabad house. There was a lot of pressure on the rabbi to do it. And he was like, all right, fine. So in such a situation, you should not give that kid an aliyah, but if you need to, you could. Okay, anybody have any questions? That's pretty good. Okay, I'll read this one last halacha. One who was an ola. Ola means the one getting the aliyah, getting called up to the Torah. One who was an ola in the synagogue and happens to be present at another synagogue where he is called up again. Happens often. This is very common. Chabad davens like 10 o'clock in the morning. A lot of other shuls start at 7. And we got the best kiddush in town. So what happens? The guy will leave the first synagogue down the street, and he'll come to our shul because we have a big party. Chabad always likes to party, so he'll come to our party. But what if he walks in the middle of the Kriyas Torah, reading of the Torah, and I call him up? I didn't know where he came from. What should he do? He should go up a second time. Even if it's the same parsha, he should go up and he should read it a second time. It's not a problem. In fact, it happens in our own shul. Somebody who is in the downstairs minyan, and their minyan ends earlier, and the guy comes up, and I call him up again. Usually after I call them up, they're like, oh, I already got an aliyah before. Well, there's nothing you can really do about it now anyway, because once you call him up, we don't sit him back down. So we try not to embarrass too many people. Anybody have any questions? No questions? Guess halacha is pretty straightforward. Oh, okay. With that, yeah. Here we go.
Hey,
what's up?
So there's been plenty of times that we've had 9 guys, and there's for the morning, the shacharis, and the rabbi never does that. There's a couple of kids there that are ready for their bar mitzvah, but he never elevates them to complete a minyan.
Yeah.
And I'm Chabad. So why not?
I don't think it's received by. I don't think it's accepted by everybody. In Shulchan Aruch, it's not accepted. Maybe it was done in certain places, in certain times, certain cities, certain villages, but generally the Jewish people as a whole did not accept that. In other words, it's an opinion in halacha. There's an opinion in Jewish law that you can do it, but majority of the opinions, the majority of the leaders held like you can't do that. So we try not to do it.
Okay.
It's called being machmir.
Fair enough.
Yeah. I don't even know it's called being machmir. I think it's that one opinion is like lenient. It's a little iffy. So, especially in places that are very Zohar. We use a lot of Kabbalah. We incorporate a lot of Kabbalah into our practice. Chabad has a lot of Kabbalah in practice. That's why I'm much more comfortable in a Sephardic synagogue. If I ever have to go to another synagogue, I go to a Sephardic one over an Ashkenazi one because I'm much more familiar with the customs. Those who really understand the Kabbalah behind it and what's going on spiritually, so to speak, it's not right. So we try not to do it. All right. Okay, everybody. I'll see you tonight. God willing, we'll do Torah Roundup. Enjoy the rest of the day. Be well.
Thank you.
Shavua tov, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.
You too.
Bye. Thank you,
Bye.
Rabbi.
Adios.